what you guys like to see, because I know people always have good fun with the war horde. So of course some of this is meat and potatoes, and of course that's really good to remember. So we'll talk about it again to kind of refresh Git's memories as we end the end of the edition. Not sure what to play, want to go out the strongest peak. I think this is around the strongest kind of consensus list or archetype there is for orcs, but you got to be a cunning Git, and you don't have to use these exact units. So of course we have the Gazgul Thraka and the Big Mech combo from Mason Mutt's 5-in-1 War Horde list. He has the Pain Boy with Cunning but Brutal and a War Boss. That's for another 20-man unit of boys. I always stress that when you run this archetype of Gaz mob plus another mob, right? You need to have that mob specialize in something and not generally just do its mob thing if I run at you and just stand there, right? You need Cunning but Brutal for the fact that now the enemy has to decide which am I going to kill. I have to hurry up and kill Gaz unit. Can I kill this one? This one's going to fall back and do things. I have to prioritize my assets better, and it leads to mistakes for the enemy, and it actually makes that unit way more deadly and way more valuable throughout the game. Of course, other like mobs you could use is a Zagrot Grop Brick. That's for its speed utility and the fact that you wouldn't have to pay for a wagon. Of course, there's Beast Snag-a-Mob that we've seen a little bit here and there where people take a Beast Boss and just snag a boys. Still bring them in a wagon, but then you have a different, more killy kind of version of the better counter to maybe if you're fighting multiple Necrons, and a typical 20-man unit of boys with a Pain Boy won't do the output for you, right? Sometimes it's like, all right, I'm just going to bring 20 Snaggas in a battle wagon instead, and it's cheaper. But then that unit can still get Cunning but Brutal to a degree, right? So it's like, ooh, that's pretty awesome. That's why I really like this one. And I think I personally, for the fun of it, like the Snag-a-Mob a lot, even though Zod is like more of like the more cunning version. And then we have 2 war bosses, and those 2 war bosses are for 2 units of Breakaboy. There was a time when people are like, well, we'll just run Breakaboys with no boss, right? And it's like, well, there was a little time where that was efficacious or good for you, but at this point it's like you just need to get stuck in there and just have a variety of killing tools, or crumping tools. Take out elite infantry, take out armor. You need the efficiency because it's such a low amount of punches, and it's only anti 4 plus. And sometimes you find that in a lot of your desired things to target, even with your tank busters, it's anti 4 plus. Getting there with your full unit, and you wish you had more shots, more punches when you got stuck in. Yeah, very nice for the orcs to even have access to that. There was a time when we didn't. And of course, those go in SWAT teams with 2 5-man flash kits. Absolutely love that. And of course, these is almost on every orc list. And when you're playing competitively in this archetype, so you got a wagon, 2 trucks, boom, that's just about it. Where I like to be as well. As I mentioned before, though, there's some lists where you drop the wagon and bring more trucks. Maybe you have Zod. Speaking of Zod, you have 2 individual 11-man units of Gretchen for your screening your backfield. Maybe one to run up and screen, maybe even bring in from the table edge to reserve, and just throw some OC around later in the game once you have some space. You need 1 unit of Mandos, like always. Cunning gets lead the way. So that ability for us to combat squad them, wow, fantastic. We've all loved and appreciated that. And that's that. I like that because it gives us room to breathe between choosing Snickrot all the time and not having Snickrot. And on this list, there's no Snickrot, right? Some people absolutely always want Snickrot. Sometimes people are fine without him. You let me know what kind of Git you are, right? Who's a Snickrot Git here? That's what I definitely want to know. Who is someone who always wants to bring Snickrot? Who's fine without? Right? I think we already have a poll up, so I can't do it for that, but I would. And then we have 1 unit of Storm Boy. Typically, in the competitive scene, people like multiple units of Storm Boy. So, I might talk to Mason. He might come on channel. We might have to actually talk more about Warhorde one time before the edition's over. And one thing I would ask him is, how'd you feel about just 1 unit of Storm Boy? 1 unit, sometimes you're like, well, that's all I need to throw away for trash. But it's like, all right, well, he doesn't have a Snickrot and he only has 1 Storm Boy. So that's a little bit interesting, right? So he definitely was quite lean here when it comes down to what he was choosing to get stuck in, right? He's definitely trying to punch people out here. And overall, he did a great job on his scoring as well. So let's go over his path to victory. As we have Mason here, of course, he did lose his 3rd game, but it's all good. So we'll no worry about that. But we'll talk about the ones he got stuck in with and had a good time. All right, I see someone right now already say, I'm for sure a Snickrot boy. All right, dude, for sure a Snickrot boy. Uh-oh. look who showed up though. Zyra Warsnagger, you called. Whoa! I'm a super Zod fan, so nice to see you in the chat, Zod. And I was just talking to 40K Dirtbag about Zagra, right? And he's absolutely fantastic. So as much as this list is highly respectable and Mason did great with it, like I said, a good little change there could be using a Zod brick or even a Zod grid alongside a boy brick, right? But then you're kind of running out of break. So it's a lot to say. But shout out to Zod for showing up to chat. We're getting stuck in, lad. So we got Zod Love here. We got Mando, Snick Route, all representation, which is, healthy look for us orcs going to the end of the edition, going into our next one, right? So we see his first matchup was into the Adepta Sororitas for Hallowed Martyrs. We got a Canoness, Demi Fuge, Hospitaler, Junith, Morgan Val, and a Paladin. Double emulators, 2 units of 3 Arcoflagellant, double castigators, 2 units of Celestine Sacrosaint, a Dominion, the Paragon Warsuit, Seraphim, and some Novitiate squad. I definitely always find this game to be interesting about just meet in the mid cable and pressure and smash into the sisters because they kind of want to meet you there. Now you can't let Morgan, get everything she wants off you on you, right? So that's why it's important sometimes if they like are trying to be too sneaky and they put them in reserve for some reason. It's like, all right, then I'm just gonna take over table space because sometimes they decide to use their sacrosaints to create the space and then they'll have her come in. But if you're playing Warhorde and you don't really have that much DACA, you're like, okay, well, I'm just gonna meet you. That's where fight on deaths are very important in this matchup, like with breakaboys, even when they crump somebody. And there's an interrupt happening here because you're gonna get in so many fights. Typically, sacrosaints are kind of considered a durable unit that can hold the line, but not against mobs of boys that have sustained and lethal that are just kind of like blending through them. Then it just comes down to what kind of output these sisters can do. And, depending on the mission, you can kind of run them over a lot of the time. And that's kind of what happened here, right? So I generally like that matchup with this archetype, with the orcs. It's like, all right, I got the tools to kind of run you over. Got a couple tanks somewhere, and the breaker boys can get into you, and you still got to deal with Gaz, and Gaz is going to be running down Morgan Val. So that's a fun game. It's a fun game, right? So then we move to the second matchup. And like I said, I think we might have Mason be able to come on the channel and talk more about it. So if you're interested all your Warhorde gets, remember he might be on. So let me know in the comments what you want to talk about with him. So we have his second matchup with the Death Guard. So we have a Demon Prince of Nurgle with Bionic Blight. We have a Great Unclean One. Oh, look at that. Another Great Unclean One. Mortadion Rodigus. Triple Heavy Blight Launchers, Nurglings, and then 3 10-man units of Poxwalker. So this is almost like a Demon's Army, right? It's almost like a Demon's Army, but you actually have some good fire support with these guys. You can't let that bloat drone launchers really get off on you. That's pretty rough, right? So if they deal with their blast, they can blow a lot of chunks of your boys away. Good way to get stuck in is start touching them because they have blast. They can't really do anything about it once they're touched. And for the most part, this list is pretty straightforward, right? They're going to meet you on the objectives. You're going to call a wall. You're going to have Gaz's lethal ability. You're going to be able to stack that with sustain lethal 5+ on your other boy unit and your Gaz unit. You're going to be able to fight on death with an interrupt. You're going to be able to art his nails. You're going to be able to run in with breakaboys and possibly one shot a Great Unclean One. There's definitely a good chance that you're going to be able to smash through a lot of these data sheets when you're bringing the breakaboys. That's where I favor them more as well than like tank busters, for example. Because though the tank busters have the ability to like roll more shots and get a blast and such like that, when you have sustained 5+ access with breakaboys, it just sustains as a whole and you're hitting on 2s and your war boss is there to help clean up with volume of punches. It does mean that you could really mathematically one shot a Rodigus, for example, right? Especially if your dev hammer goes off. So 90 right there on that big horn. And then we move into his third game, which was into another version of Adepta Sororitas with a different archetype with triple Hospitalators, a Ministorum Priest, and Morgan Val. So less character points, which means they got more stuff, which means they're going to have good volume. We have emulators with double rhinos. We have a Celestine Insanes, and then triple Sacrosaints, a Dominion squad, and Paragon Warsuit, double Retributors, Sanctifiers, and then a Caladius Assassin. So a Caladius Assassin means that you're not getting all the strats off you want either with against these sisters that you normally do, like I said, when they meet you in the middle. Mind you, This person also has more meat shields, more bodies. You have the Celestine, new Celestine models that are the instants, whatever they're called, that have both combined arms abilities. We have one more unit of Sacrosanct on this list, and that's what happens when you pay for less characters, which is exactly how you want to see more of this kind of list run out, and not so saturated with like as many castigators. So they have more volume in infantry. They still have good Melta support, so they can kind of pop your battle wagons. They have sanctifiers, they have flamers, and then like I said, a little bit of CP manipulation here. And still just enough to, transports and armor to possibly pop a truck. So I like this kind of variety of lists, right? Way more synergy and volume of combined arms and assets. So definitely more dangerous for our kind of orc list, because way more target, less target rich environment for like Breakaboys, for example, right? What are Breakaboys going to do into that many units of the sisters? The flash kits can maybe hurt normally 5-man units of them, but 10-man units are not necessarily we're trying to go into. So then it comes down to, can your boys, all your boys from Gaz's unit and your 20-man unit, go through all of that stuff? And that's where that can kind of be a little bit more dangerous, right? When they don't go for those tanks and go a little bit against the meta and have more activations. And I think we see that pattern with that Warhorde, for example, kind of list. Like you can see maybe Talu armies can do it. Guard armies can do it. I had another one off the top of my head that I was thinking. Adeptus Mechanicus, right? That's why typically if you're an experienced orc player, you're like, all right, these guys, depending on what they got, might have just enough stuff that they can sway the battle with me, right? So that's what I was saying. When we look at this meat and potato archetype, is there a way, orc community, that we could be onto something with 3 mobs into this in the next of the edition and just push through and see what happens, right? But that becomes almost outrageous to run on the battlefield for GW terrain. So that's kind of like what we would need, though, right? Based off what we're seeing here. But it is what it is. Nonetheless, great job, Mason, right? There's other little things people like to see and maybe think about as well, like 10-man flash kids bricks, but not sure if that's really going to run the good gauntlet either and help sway that battle. So great job, Mason. I can definitely see that was a definitely good sisters list put it together. Then we move into his 4th matchup where he makes a big comeback here, where he gets a 94-point win against these Militarum, Grizzled Company. So we have Acadian Command Squad, a Commissar, a Tempestus Scion Squad, and then double Rogol Dorn Commanders. 1 Cadian, double Catachan 10-man units. We have a small unit of Adelans, double Bulgrim bricks. All right, that's nice to see. Double Kriegers, Ratlings, 1 Rogol Dorn, Sentinel, and then only 1 Scion unit. Okay, only 1 5-man unit Scions. So that's good because you don't want these dropping on too much and just totally annihilating your boys. I mean, like you said, he actually has a lot of targets with these big hammers between all these Rogol Dorns where he wants to. Now, getting to them is harder, right? Easier said than done. So there's a chance that he just ran into the Bulgrins and ran over the Bulgrins with some Breakaboy support there as well, right? There could be that they did their little number on people too. And then just little fight skirmishes. You never know. Some 5-man flash kits could pop a Sentinel, could run into some into some Ratlings. And then of course, like I said, I wonder if more Storm Boys would be where people like. But I know SWAT teams feel absolutely great into these matchups, and I'm happy to see them. Mandos leading the way with infiltration could also affect these. So this was definitely a good game on his end because this army has a lot of little assets and ability to manipulate OC and be all over the battlefield. So I definitely think that's a really great win on his end, especially to come over that, right? So they had to be with Bulgrin, good infantry mob units. So great job by Mason for overcoming that, putting up a big 94-point win there. So like I said, when we talked to him, I think I want to know what happened more in those 2 games because he, good work there nonetheless. Then we move to his second to last game, which was against the Tyranids. And he says he likes big bugs. All right. Well, you know who else likes big bugs? The Breaker Boys. War, right? So we have Death Leaper, the Swarm Lord, Neural Tyrants, Gargoyles, Biovores, Triple Lictors, 2 Exocrines, 2 Maleceptors, Norn Emissary, and then 2 Tyrannofaxes with Rupture Cannon. So Rupture Cannons can do a number on a battle wagon, right? If they can draw both to them, it's like, all right, that's a dead wagon. Especially if an Exocrine shoots at it 2 and then makes it reroll 1. But if you can get 1 Rupture Cannon on it, there's a chance it can survive and stage up real nicely. Nonetheless, this is the kind of orc matchups orcs like to see, demons, big monsters, stuff that's going to meet you in the middle. It is a little scary initially staging up with your, when there's Exocrines around for your trucks and the Tyrannofax effects, but this is a pretty straightforward game. You know where the Norn Emissary is going, you know where the Maliceptors are going, and you know you got to be making contact with them and keeping your breaker boys behind walls, maybe to avoid overwatches, and then run charge through and smash some enemies. I think even outside of the wall, the breaker boys actually with the 5+ could crush something like an Exocrine, for example. Not sure about a Maliceptor because it has built-in debuffs. And he was playing Crusher Stampede, so I don't think they have a Feel No Pain built into there. They think they have like fights on deaths and such. Yeah. So love to see that. Love to see when orcs can actually come through on this and break through. I know they would have a hard time also with killing Gaz. So once you get Gaz to that Norn Emissary, after that, Gaz just keeps running shop, right? Gaz just keeps running through it. You got good OC here to flip the primary on them. So awesome stuff right there. 87-point win for him. And then we move into his last game, which against the Deathwatch space, which is very killy, very intimidating for your mobs and your positioning. But once this stuff's on the table, it's where it's at, right? Once it drops in, you know, so you definitely want to take up space, see what he got. He has a captain in Gravis armor, you know, secretly a good unit for the most part, relatively -1 damage, right? So Judiciar, Lieutenant with Combi, and then a Watchmaster with Tomb of Excladis. We have a 10-man veteran squad. Is that 10? Yeah, 10-man veteran squad, an intercessor squad, followed by a Terminator squad of five. A Fortis Terminator squad with the plasma. Not one I thought we've seen too often. Two Fortis units, an Incursor squad. The Indomitor teams. All right, here are the ones, and the Infiltrators with an ATV. So these two big bricks, when they come down, very actually effective at dealing damage to your orc mobs and units. But it also means they have to pop your wagon. You know, they have to get in position, so you have to really, in my opinion, take up board space with Mandos, make sure that they don't actually stage up on you that easily. And then really it's about just being how fast you are when the stuff actually is on the table. You run into them, crash into them with your with your boys of Gaz and the MacBoy combo with Here We Go and Follow Me Lads, and you run a fall across the field and crash into them. Because these guys are mostly kind of just slow dudes infantry that you gotta make contact with and take up, because otherwise they're just deep striking on you and just kind of picking you apart, and that could be too much. But I'd like to hear more from Mason, and like we said, we were talking, right? So we should look forward to the when we actually do the episode. I think we're gonna do with him, you guys. So shout out to him. He got a 73-point win. So I definitely want to see what the mission was there. And shout out to Mason for his awesome War Horde list that I think most people can kind of take something away from and usually do quite effective lists with this archetype. So you let me know, what's your orc War Horde list looking like? Do you like using double mobs with alongside Gaz? Do you randomly go back to Mega Knobs? You know, what's your other hammer unit instead of Breaker Boys? Are you a Mega Knob lover with the War Boss, a Knob lover? Do you run more Storm Boys or not? I like to see it. I think I'm running more into the 20 Snaggle Boy comp personally. Nonetheless, Mason's the one who went out there and got stuck in and did such a great job into those matchups. So shout out to Mason Mutz, and we look forward to talking this skit again. War for the War Hole. Shout out to our sponsors, the Baron of Dice, as they helped us do our wall tactic dice. So shout them out. Check them out in the description, 5% off in the discount because nobody likes taxes. And shout out to Baron of Dice. They allow us to do our paint competition. So thank you very much to them. If you enjoyed the clip, check out the full video here. If you'd like to see more tactics, click here.
Let's get stuck in, lads!